have complicated feelings about that episode a little bit, actually. I always love Star Trek, especially love the original series campiness. But I've been watching a lot of Stargate recently. We've watched a lot of more modern Star Trek recently.
Yeah.
Watching this, I was like,
Yeah. All right. Hello.
hello.
Welcome to a Subspace transmission.
Woohoo, we're back.
Yeah. It's been a little bit, but hopefully folks got the warning that we are going to talk about some Star Trek today.
Woohoo. I love Star Trek.
Yeah. And we've done some of these episodes recently. I think last time we did one on the DS9 episode, Take Me Out to the Holosuite.
Mm-hmm.
And today, our plan is to talk about an original series episode called All Our Yesterdays, Season 3, Episode 23.
Have we done
I don't think
real, honest-to-goodness original Kirk and Spock yet?
I don't think so.
Wow.
We talked about it. Maybe we talked about it as part of like movies or something.
Definitely as part of movies. Definitely as part of like captaincies and away teams and all that sort of stuff. But we've never reviewed an actual episode of these two.
Yeah, and I don't think I don't think we're really planning on doing a review. I guess.
No. Here's my review. 7 out of 10.
Yeah, this was a pretty good original series episode.
It's as good as it gets in season 3 anyway.
Yeah. And I think, famously troubled, I think, is how season 3 would be described, right?
Yeah. I mean, like
fractious in really every direction.
One of the biggest self-destructions / outside forces moves in TV history, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Like we could do a whole episode about the fracturing of the cast a little bit towards the end, the fracturing of the relationship between Gene Roddenberry and the studio, the fracturing
there are entire books and movies, I think, made about these topics, right?
Yeah. And so season 3 finds us with 2 set pieces made out of paper mache and the outdoor brick wall.
Yeah, something like that, right?
I mean, right? Like the cave is a set piece. You could see the paper crumples.
Yeah.
You've got the jail cell and the street above it, which is like one half set.
The street above it is clearly like a studio backlot or something somewhere that they just borrowed.
Uh-huh. And you have the quote unquote the library, which is half a room.
Right.
That's the set. And
one jury-rigged door and a bunch of drawers.
Yeah.
Essentially.
And other than 5 extras, we've got a third of the cast.
Right. You don't hear, the only people as part of the actual, the only faces you see, right, are Kirk, Spock, and McCoy.
Yep.
You hear James doing Scotty. Like they had to call him and have him phone in a line or two.
It's almost the same line every time. We're going to beam you up. No, not yet.
We're got to go now, Captain. Yeah. And nothing else really. No one else. No Uhura, no Sulu, no Chekhov, no one.
No one.
And, I mean, it's clear that, it shows, right? It's obvious that stuff is missing.
Yeah.
But, it, for all of that, for the episode on its own merits, they tried to do, it was a somewhat interesting plot and thing with the characters they had, right? Or I thought it was anyway.
I think that it represents to me, yes, some of the better aspects of the original series for sure. Finally getting to see Spock and McCoy's real relationship blossom in front of everyone. That like not much later than this, the show ends, and it's another 10 years ish before they're back on screen together, right? And
was it that long between this and then those movies?
77
I guess it was, right?
7 was the movies, and this, so it's like 8 years. 8 years.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a decent amount of time. You're right.
Yeah, because I think, is it like 70? No, so it might have been 78 that the movie came out, because 77 is Star Wars, and then they were like, oh, we should scrap our plans to bring these people back to the small screen and just make movies with them. So it might be 78 the original the motion picture comes out.
Okay, I knew it was the 70s. I didn't know if it was early or late. I just not paying attention here.
Yeah.
I guess the like later Star Trek movies were definitely from the 80s though. So that
absolutely,
that
all of
makes
them
sense.
are, because between motion picture, which is 78 or 79, then you have a big gap before Wrath of Khan. I mean, they got into production on Wrath of Khan kind of right away, but it's like 3 years maybe. It's definitely into the 80s that Wrath of Khan comes out.
Yeah,
because the uniforms are so much better.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff that's better from movie one to movie every other movie.
Movie one might, I don't know. Anyway, we'll do movies another time. We could talk about the plot for another minute.
Sure.
Just the overarching about the plot, and then go through it, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is. It was interesting to me because, well, like this episode has some stuff I think that was not done before this, or at least not to my knowledge. I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of the original series episodes. But this is a time travel episode, right?
Kind of, yeah.
I mean, they go back in time.
Yeah.
Not in the way that modern Star Trek tends to do time travel episodes.
More in the Guardian of Forever sense.
Yes. Yeah. That's a much better comparison for sure. And I thought it was an interesting look at the three original series characters that we have, and the way that they were able to structure like a interesting little set piece around this very small, set of conflicts. And then you really got to see like the character of these characters in this small little runtime, because there was nothing. They had to do something with the characters because it's all they had. They didn't have anything else.
Yeah.
They couldn't do big action scenes because those are expensive. Like, the Kirk gets into a sword fight for about 10 seconds. And then they had to get that guy off the set because they don't want to pay the other actor,
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a good time. I enjoyed it for what it was, I think. And we'll start talking about it, I think, as we start, comparing and contrasting here. But
sure. I think I agree with you about, I enjoy it for what it is. I feel it related to itself, even related to the first 2 seasons of this show. It is light. It is very light in terms of what it provides and how much ambition it has and how much interplay. I mean, if you're talking about character studies, even one of the ones we talked about when we talked about the Guardian of Forever, and going back to the one where they go back to like 1960 or whatever, or what was it? The Depression.
Yeah.
That has as much character study in it kind of as this does, but this has different motivations. It's weird to think what it could have been if it was early in that show, or what it would be if this episode was in Next Generation, right?
Yeah.
The pace of this,
it's so different.
Yeah, the pace of this would be entirely different if it was a Next Generation episode, and they'd be talking about more than just the cool interaction between Spock and McCoy and his, previous Vulcan nature, versus in Next Generation, you'd have these interplays between the characters that were stuck and trying to get along together, and you'd also have people trying to rescue them on the ship, and Geordi and working on a solution. And then you'd have
the angle that's totally missing here, right? There is no people on the ship trying to rescue them, trying to come up with a solution. That stuff is just absent.
And you'd also have Deanna Troi and somebody, probably Picard or whoever, morally negotiating amongst themselves whether they had the moral obligation to save these people, instead of letting them all go to the past and die and all that sort of stuff. Like,
yeah, or like, is it right for them to leave their crew members in the past? It already happened. They've been there, right? Like, what's the direction there? And then, to argue, with Mr. Ataz himself about like, is what they're doing right? Is any of this?
There'd be, and that's kind of was saying, like, you can tell the age of it because it's much more concerned with getting through its plot and doing the interesting character study that they had planned, and that's it. They don't have the later series hang-ups about trying to like make sure they think about the scenario from the Starfleet perspective, which is a little bit characteristic of Kirk anyway. Kirk needs to save his crew. That's all he's concerned about, and he's gonna beat up Ataz and Ataz's replicas as much as he needs to.
Right. And like the idea of Starfleet being a thing isn't so much a thing here.
Yeah.
In this show anyway, right? Like they mention it at the top that like we're on a mission to explore or whatever, but kind of that's all you get.
It must have been nice to watch these episodes, even the third season, right? It must have been like fantastic to watch this stuff live.
I wonder. I don't like this stuff is old enough that like I think you weren't guaranteed. So this is something else I wanted to talk about actually. It wasn't guaranteed that these episodes were being watched in color, right? Mm-mm. Color TVs were around certainly,
and this later season
had them.
This later season was on at 10 p.m. So good luck watching it.
Yeah, right. Like that is not a highly coveted spot, at least in this time period. I don't know how it is these days.
Oh, it was the death slot then too.
Yeah, like on a Friday at 10 p.m. is where shows go to die. But beyond that, this is I don't know where you watched this episode. I watched it on Netflix, but these have been remastered.
Yes.
And I wonder, because I was not able to find a comparison footage between the original.
Mm-hmm.
What did they? I assume they touched up stuff like the color because that's an easy thing, and correct the color to make it look correct on modern monitors and such.
The one I watched was widescreen.
Okay, so certainly that's changed. So mine was not. I did not see it in widescreen. I don't know. Interesting. I assume it just makes the set look wider.
I think so. Let me see. I can pull it up real quick. But go ahead.
So beyond that stuff, I definitely noticed that like the models at the beginning of the ship flying through space and zooming away at the end, and some of the effects of the exploding star and the planet being destroyed at the end.
Oh, interesting. It's 4:3 in what I'm looking at now. I wonder if my TV just moved it to widescreen.
Oh, maybe your TV did the little
my
zoom.
TV might have auto zoomed it. It's definitely 4:3 on Netflix though.
Okay, yes, I know it was because I watched it on Netflix and I remember it being 4:3.
But that's higher res than it would have been for sure.
Yeah, it looked pretty nice even on my 1440p monitor here.
I watched it on a 4K TV and I could see pixelation on. No, well, I could definitely see as much as the film allowed me to see, but there was also some slight pixelation in the like coats and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, you could see film grain pretty easily, right?
Like, I mean, like actual like compression artifacting.
Okay, so hard to know if that's because of streaming or because of just the source quality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I was curious to know what would have been touched up here as part of this thing, because I want like that scene at the end, right? Like the star explodes and the planet kind of is destroyed and the ship goes to warp.
Yeah.
Looked pretty smooth in a way that I didn't like. It didn't look like practical effects to me, right?
Okay.
So I wondered how that looked originally. I wondered if you had seen it, but I was not able to find a source for the.
I'm sure it looked fine. I mean, The lower res the monitor, the better it looks.
I guess that's true, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I don't really have much else to say about like the actual content of the episode,
Yeah,
other than
so
to like analyze the stuff around it, kind of, which is I think more interesting.
I mean, so they go to the planet of Sarpedon. What? Sarpedon?
Yeah, I didn't even write down the name.
Yeah. Which is this planet that they know is going to die to a supernova. I don't know why they go there when there's 3 hours left before the supernova. What are they going to do? Save 50 people? You know? They know that they're all going to die. So they go for some reason and they meet Atoz, who is a play on words for A to Z because he's a librarian.
Mm-hmm.
And he says he needs to prepare them and they can go wherever they want to go. And it turns out he's got a machine called the Atavachron that sends people through time. Now,
yes.
I don't know about you, but I feel like it's easier to figure out space flight than time travel. So that's weird.
Yeah. It seems like that should be an easier problem to solve,
but it seems like the Atavachron has been around a long time, so maybe they didn't develop it. Who knows? Maybe it's a piece of ancient technology or something.
Yeah.
So they discover that they've been sent through portals to the past, where Spock meets Zarabeth.
Yes.
Who says that Zarkon has sent her there as a prisoner forever, basically because her family tried to overthrow him. Kirk meets another library person, and that's about the extent of his plot after his rapier fight.
Yes.
The meat of the episode really shows up when Spock, and this is probably something to actually talk about, when Spock starts to lose his composure, right?
Right.
And the slow play of like him falling in love maybe with Zarabeth.
Mm-hmm.
And McCoy recovering from his entire body being frostbitten into...
Apparently. He, like, you know, I don't know if you've ever had frostbite. I haven't, but I am told it is unbelievably painful. Like, unfreezing a frostbitten part of your body is just like, if it does not, like, you know...
fall off.
You know, like necrose and detach from your body, it is just unbelievably insanely painful.
Yeah.
So McCoy's a champ for taking all that like a trooper and just, you know, passing out. I mean, the passing out part, reasonable. I believe that is also what happens when you get super cold and, you know, is it hypothermia?
If you're hypothermic, you're cold.
Yeah. So that part makes sense. But the not writhing in pain as you warm up part is just really impressive on his part.
Way to go, McCoy.
Yeah.
And the development there is that, you know, Spock eventually starts to, you know, he reminds McCoy that they're stuck in the past. Zarabeth lies to them and says that she says no one can go back. You know, she doesn't explain that maybe they could if they weren't changed like she was somehow.
Right.
Spock sort of loses his mind and probably takes her to bed.
So that was going to be a discussion, I think. It's certainly implied, right? In the strictures of 1960s television, they weren't going to be able to show more than what they did.
They were clothed and sitting on a bed holding each other in the post-coital 1960s positions of one sitting behind the other.
Right.
Yeah.
And they definitely can't, you know, they couldn't show them like laying down. They could barely show them kissing. You know,
she was not allowed to apparently show her belly button for some reason.
Oh, interesting. Is that why the thing was shaped with like a weird triangle there?
Yeah, which they've shown belly buttons on this show before.
Yep.
I don't know.
I don't know, dude. But the sort of the, I don't know what the social mores or whatever of the time wouldn't have permitted them to show that. And certainly Spock, the character, had he not been under this mental influence of the past or whatever, which also, by the way, is not something they ever talk about again in time travel episodes.
Oh, he went through time travel and that means he's less evolved. somehow all of a sudden.
That's not really something that ever is brought up again.
Uh-huh.
But certainly Spock, the character, would never do these, doesn't have feelings like that or wouldn't ever admit to them.
Right, which McCoy catches on to because Spock says something about the past, right? And McCoy's like, "Oh, I'm a genius and frostbitten, but I understand.
Yeah,
it's the past that's affecting him because we've gone so far back."
Right. And meanwhile, what were McCoy's ancestors doing 5,000 years ago?
Right, exactly.
I bet it was equally bad for him.
Wouldn't he be like trying to bash rocks together to make fire at this point?
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a little. I don't know I don't know what that is, but it's a little something weird going on there.
Yeah.
But also, I think this is an interesting jumping off point for a lot of what's the like fandom discussions around Spock.
Apocrypha.
Yeah, because this episode is the source of a lot of places that people want to have Spock to do fan stories and fan created texts and things like that of Spock's children.
Spock's children have 2 books, 2 real books that are not considered canon
as from this season.
They're called, what are they called? They're called Children of Yesterday. Let me see, hold on, I had it written down and now I forgot.
That sounds like something that I would believe.
Whoops. I'm making weird noises with my computer because well, that doesn't help. Where did I put it? Okay, well anyway, there's 2 books. They were written in the 70s, I think. And
makes sense.
One of them is about, here it is, Yesterday's Son, which is he has a son with Zarabeth, and the son's name is Zar, and Zar is sent to the future by the Guardian of Forever because he doesn't belong in the past.
Oh, okay. Yes, I see. I found them now.
Yeah,
the other one is
Time for Yesterday is the sequel. Yeah. So if you're listening, modern Star Trek writers, you have a really cool opportunity to bring back some Apocrypha.
Yeah. And both of those books star Zar, the son of Spock and Zarabeth. It is also a place where a lot of slash fiction writers come to find things for Spock and McCoy's relationship.
I see. Okay.
So don't know if you knew that or not.
I did not know that. I don't know that I needed it. I didn't know that I needed it.
And so now you know it, and now everyone else knows it too.
Bummer.
Hey, man. Not a bummer. People are into stuff that they're into. Good on them.
Okay.
It is but the point is because this episode really has nothing else except character moments. Mm-hmm. You get a lot of it, right? And so it's a logical jumping off point. And the fact that this is a place where Spock is freed from his emotional sort of drain, that he can't ever, produce emotions, and he can't really ever do. He always has his logicalness, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of interesting fan works out there that play on that stuff because of this time frame, which I thought was very interesting, and I had certainly learned more than I knew before I watched this episode.
I looked into those books because I was somewhat interested to see if they were still canon, and they're not. Because otherwise, I would actually probably have picked them up and read them. Just to see.
No, they're super not. It is worth examining a little bit, though. I
think what we didn't really finish. I wanted to finish by talking about.
Get to the end.
Well, I just wanted to talk about what Bones does here a little bit because it took me aback actually for a second. Mm-hmm. I didn't remember this episode very well, and so when McCoy started yelling at Spock, I thought that maybe he was going crazy too. And he finishes the speech, and Spock starts to strangle him, and then you realize what McCoy was doing the whole time was goading Spock into realizing he's lost control of his emotions.
Yeah.
But Bones says this, which I don't think I would have used as a like Spock, you're losing your mind kind of thing, right? He says, she's a woman, Spock. She's condemned to a life of loneliness. She'd do anything to keep you here.
Yeah, you get a little bit of this, like, and you see it in other places, just sort of like the way things are shot, sort of the way Zarabeth is framed in the film, the clothes she's wearing, this sort of like paternalistic kind of bent where I don't know if it's the intent of the screenwriters to just sort of be like, this woman is crazy.
This temptress.
This seductress is here to tempt our pure male characters to do horrible things like eat meat and sleep with her. It's like, I mean, it's not that bad. You can, I mean, you know, say what you, Spock is vegetarian, I guess, and that's fine. But like, it's not like Spock should condemn himself for eating flesh. You know, like that was, you know, you kind of see some of those, like, I don't know what the right word is that I'm trying to convey, but it's certainly jarring to modern sensibilities where you'd be like,
yeah, I would definitely have understood what he was doing. Well, yeah, I understood what he was doing, but like, man, the words used to get there, it's like, wow.
And like, especially when, you know, earlier in the episode, you know, it's like, McCoy, you were hitting on her. It's not like, you know, the episode earlier when he is first, you know, coming around and he and Zarabeth and Spock were sitting around, like McCoy was drinking soup or something.
Yeah.
McCoy was like, oh, well, you'll notice, like, I'm much nicer to be around than him, haha. And then, you know, like, it's like, bro, what are you doing here? You know, do you think you are so much better than him?
Man, do you know if you've fully recovered from frostbite everywhere?
Right. I mean, yeah, great question, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it definitely seemed like he was being a little overly harsh to Spock, right? In a way, like, I wouldn't have used these phrases, maybe.
Yeah. Kirk gets back and fights like Kirk does, and then they eventually save everyone and warp out of there as Ataz runs to the past.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's fine. It's a good episode-ish. The story's all right, but like it doesn't hit the same as Next Gen would have in this instance, or like.
Some of the stuff that, you know, you never get an explanation for what the Atavachron really is and does. They don't even try to make one up.
Yeah.
That's certainly something the Next Generation would have at least made up some science magic about it. With, you know, they used tachyons or something. I don't know. They would have said some words.
I don't know that I need that as much as I needed. I liked it. I liked watching it. It's indicative of later Star Trek. And reminds you of better episodes, maybe, but it's still good. But like, the thing that Next Gen does, or even Spock when he's his normal self and he lectures everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's right and what's wrong? What are the implications of these decisions? What can we do? What can't we do? Is all kind of missing from this. It's a very simple story of like, oh no, we're trapped. We must escape.
Yep. And so, you know, even afterwards, right, when Spock comes back to his normal self, you don't get that moralizing lesson at the end. You know, it's like, this is what happens when you try to, you know, escape your fate into the past or something like that. None of that. They're just like, well done, chums. Thanks for saving us there, Captain. Mm-hmm. Scotty, let's go. And that's the end of the episode.
Leonard McCoy, I think, is the standout of the three.
Definitely. I wonder, you know, and we talked about some of the fractured relationships as part of this season of this show. I wonder, was this a Spock's attempt to get his character some like on-screen, you know, more on-screen time, right? Because this really is a Spock episode. Kirk is in it, yeah, and he's off kind of doing his own thing, but this episode is more about Spock than
I will
Kirk,
sum up the Kirk plot. Kirk has a sword fight. Kirk gets thrown in jail. Kirk escapes jail. Kirk rescues his friends.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing outside of what I said happens. It took about as much time as it took me to say it as it took for it to happen on screen.
You had to argue about witches for a little bit in between there, but that's really it.
That creepy
There's literally
Irish
nothing
woman.
else.
I'm gonna clip that creepy Irish woman out and start sending it to people.
It was well acted.
Yeah.
In the creepiness for sure.
Did you watch Stargate?
SG-1, the TV show?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's an episode in there. Let me try and remember what it's called. What's it called? Vorash is the planet. Exodus? No, that's not it. There's an episode in there called, I can't remember what it's called, where they accidentally create a supernova. Or they accidentally, like, they ignore some rules about how to send the Stargate wormhole to places, and they end up sending it through a star accidentally, which doesn't hurt anybody except that it drags heavy matter into the star and creates like a chain reaction that's going to eventually set the sun to like supernova and kill everybody or something like that. I'm trying to remember the exact plot off the top of my head, but the reason that the episode sticks out in my head, I still remember it to this day, is that it's a whole episode about like what is the moral obligation that these people have to help the people on the planet that is going to die.
Right. That would have been the stuff we would have learned about if this was a Next Generation episode, right?
Right. And so, like, yeah, I mean, they did break the rules on getting there, but, like, you could just chalk it up to, well, sorry, we can help you escape through the Stargate, but, like, your planet's dead. And then they instead, they deal with the politics of the planet. And the politics of the planet is that some people are, like, these fundamentalist religion people, and it's Thor's will or Freyr's will or whoever they worship, right? And that means that we're all going to die. And some of them are like, no, these strangers from the stars must have been sent to us by our God to help us. And like the infighting that happens there, and the fundamentalists blow up the rocket that they bring through to try and save the sun by sending another super heavy element into the sun and end up killing some of the Stargate team, right? And like, how do you react to that? Like the commander wants to shoot the people that shot his people and all that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's in an hour, which is about the same amount of time that this ran, 10 times the amount of moral obligation and self-search and plot and all that sort of stuff happens.
It's also, so SG-1 came out in a very different era of TV as well, right?
Absolutely.
Like
absolutely.
The 90s? Was it a 90s show?
Yeah, that probably was
in the early
2000 at that point. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll say early 2000s even.
Yeah.
You couldn't. The thing that I think struck me watching this, because I haven't watched an original series episode in quite a long time, and I think anyone who went back and watched this is likely to have felt it if they've watched a lot of modern TV. Also, there are just times where there is just a shot, and they just sit there.
Oh, and
that's all. That's the shot. The shot is these three people standing here looking at each other. That's the shot. There is
there's
dialogue, or the camera is panning, but it's panning at 3 degrees a second or whatever, very slowly across the scene as our people walk by. That's the shot. And in modern TV, and modern, I don't know, it's a weird word to use, but I would say even by the 90s, this stuff wasn't happening anymore. These shots just get cut, and you just see the characters show up at the next scene where there's dialogue. They don't have the interstitial walking down the hallway or searching the library by opening drawers, or the scene where they stumble out into the cold and walk down a corridor. They don't have those scenes. They just move to when the next piece of action is going to be, or the next dialogue or whatever.
one of the artifacts of old filmmaking that made me laugh out loud while I was watching it, and I had to check my kids' cameras, make sure I didn't wake them up, was Kirk was talking to the prosecutor or the defense attorney or whatever it was in his cell that had been through the library.
Judge, magistrate or whatever.
Yeah. And he says, I don't know, I was in the library, and the music cues and it cuts to a different shot where the guy's eyes go wide and he looks right at the camera.
Totally bug-eyed. You just hear the like dun dun,
and then the part that made me laugh even harder than that, it cuts back to the previous shot as if nothing had happened. And
the guy's face isn't like that anymore. He's just back to normal. Yeah.
It's like, don't worry, Shatner, just we'll cut in the reaction shot later, so just keep going. And so then he's like, oh, the library, and it's the guy's face is gone completely back to normal. And that reaction would have happened in scene nowadays, right? It would have been forced to happen in scene with like the secondary camera or something like that. It's so good. It's so good in that moment. This episode is just a stark reminder of how changed TV is versus what it was in the late 60s.
Yeah.
Not saying that that's a good or bad thing. It is a contrast.
It is something. Yeah. It's something you have to understand and get used to when watching old TV and old movies. I don't know. When I was younger, I used to watch the James Bond movies somewhat frequently.
Sure.
Just because they would frequently be on TV all the time, and I had nothing to do, so I'd sit around and watch TV, and there you go. And the old James Bond movies are this way too. If you go back and watch like Goldfinger, all of it, or Dr. No, from Russia with Love, there are just times where the scene is James Bond walking from his bedroom.
Come on, that's not fair. That's not fair. You've got to admit though that it's Sean Connery in half of this, and the point of that is to let him swagger on screen through every shot, right? Like,
well, just like the half of the points of those scenes with Kirk is for Kirk to swagger.
He's got a swagger, yeah.
That's his thing. Yeah, I'm just saying it's part of the filmmaking of the era.
Absolutely,
you just have to get used to it, and it is very interesting, as a modern viewer coming back and watching this stuff and being able to contrast the style and be like, oh, the thing that you get from this, right, is you get a lot more character time. You get more in-depth discussions about what the exact moment is that's happening because they can't do anything else now.
It's funny because I watched all of Star Trek in like 2015 to like 2017. I watched it all chronologically. It was over time, not like the
original series, you mean? Or
I started with the original series, and I went from the original series to the animated series to the next generation, to some of the movies, to the next generation, to the movies, and I watched it all chronologically all the way through.
Cool.
And when you watch it chronologically
by release order or chronologically in universe?
By release order at that point in time. This was before Discovery existed, and before. It was after Enterprise had ended, but I watched Enterprise later because Enterprise kind of depends on you knowing about the universe.
Yeah, it does.
Especially when you get to the plot twist at the end. So, what is chronologically for Enterprise? Well, if you don't know who Riker is, then...
Right, yeah.
It kind of doesn't matter, right? Like... If you watch Enterprise,
what a cop-out ending to Enterprise.
I'll fight you.
You like this ending?
I like the ending to Enterprise. I know that everyone's mad about it.
The ending that says, by the way, that show you watched was just a holodeck program. It maybe did or didn't happen. LOL, who cares?
I mean, it obviously happened. Like, he's watching historical programs. It's not that like Enterprise never happened. It's just that what you have been watching was Riker going through a holodeck of the history. Right? It's like watching like a history program.
How do you, they go through history programs that are fake in TNG all the time though, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
And they're just like completely made up.
I don't get the feeling that like I know that even Scott Bakula said it felt like it cheapened the story.
It did. I agree.
And I can understand it. I'm not I'm not immune to
I
people's feelings on the matter, but I don't think it's
I watched it at the time, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I didn't feel this way at the time.
okay.
But since I have gone back and rewatched Enterprise, I've only done it once since then, but it left a bad taste in my mouth. And maybe I would feel differently now that I like kind of don't care anymore.
Yeah.
But I would, I didn't like it the last time I saw it.
It didn't. To me, Enterprise leaves you with like 4 or 5 feelings. One of them being it's been a long road.
Well, it definitely was a long road getting from there to here.
Two is that Porthos is a good dog. And then beyond that, you can come away with whatever feelings you want. I like Scott Bakula as a captain. Most people didn't. Some people liked Paul. I didn't.
I don't think I had a problem with Scott Bakula in particular.
But
he wasn't like my favorite captain, but
But I think the Enterprise overall was just kind of like where a lot of people started to lose interest in Star Trek. For a little while because it didn't do a whole lot for people. And like if you watch it in release order or if in chronological order, you're like, who are these Andorian people and why do they never show up again?
Right. Yep.
I don't know. And so when I think back on it, it's already like a holodeck program in my head because Enterprise just existed.
I think the thing that I don't know. I don't want to get too far off base here. I'm talking about Enterprise, but I don't know if complaint is even the right word. I think when they created that show, they were trying to do a different thing. And they were trying to do the different thing in a format like the old thing, not realizing that society and TV sort of had moved past that format and it wasn't going to work no matter what they did.
Yeah, they definitely were late to the party, for sure.
Yeah,
and they took like Voyager and tried to change it up a little bit, and it didn't work.
The serialization of TV had gotten too far, and I mean, even DS9 showed it to them earlier than this, right? And when they were trying to bring back the syndicatable type TV show,
yeah, absolutely,
and it just wasn't going to work, and TV had progressed past that kind of story. And, they eventually got on the horse by the end of Enterprise and started putting together plot lines that got together and stuff. And it did have like some through lines, very slowly moving around. But yeah, I think it was just sort of an ill-fated attempt despite their best efforts. And sure, the efforts were generally good. I don't think, like I said, it wasn't my favorite series, but it certainly wasn't, not because they were actively sabotaging it or anything like that.
Sure. But I mean, you've got 2 years later than this, you've got shows like Lost on the air,
Yeah. Which are just like, and Lost is speaking of serialization, right? A show that is literally about, did you see last week? Do you remember all these weird things? Here's the next thing. What are these mysteries, and all this. And then, has an equally, some would say, disappointing ending. Maybe even more disappointing, I might argue.
Yeah. I mean, you've got a lot of TV that starts to crop up just after Enterprise begins, and definitely midway through Enterprise's run that are just like, 1.5 years into it. I think you've got the Battlestar movie that comes out, and then that TV show comes out midway through Enterprise's run, and you're like, well, this is better than that.
Yes, everyone agrees.
And when did Firefly come out?
It was after this, I think, but not long after Enterprise ended, I think.
No, it had to still be on during Firefly.
Did it? I mean, Firefly was only one season, so...
I know, but Firefly changes everything about science fiction and what people want to watch. Like the
I don't know. Clearly it didn't, though, because they didn't get any more seasons.
Look at, like, every single sci-fi since then is somewhat related to a space western.
I mean, I agree with you that the tastes changed, right? But I think they were underway as Firefly was starting and just continued that direction after. Firefly, the show, for as much as is beloved now, was not successful at the time.
Right? I think just like the showrunners of the original series of Star Trek, to bring us back.
Thank you. Yes, I was looking for a way.
They did not understand the opportunity they had, and it's one of those shows, especially in the early 2000s, that if people had pushed them and tried to keep them on the air and given them air and proper run times, would have been very popular, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah, no doubt. Based on how beloved that show still is, the fact a one season show, and yeah, I got a movie later, but a one season show is
the
still
movie
so
doesn't
beloved.
the movie doesn't count. It's officially removed from canon, I think.
Oh, really? They removed the ending of their own story from canon? That's interesting.
We'll have to talk to Ken about this because there were comics as late as like 2015 from Firefly, and I think some of them have like spoilers for Serenity, retconned Wash's death.
I mean, you would want to because he was such a great character and well liked.
I think maybe. I don't know. Ken, text me.
Yeah, sure. Email the podcast, Ken. Don't text him. But yeah, so anyway, back to the original series. This is TV made for a different era and a different time, and you have to be aware of it while watching these episodes.
That's why my mental go-to was, I wonder what this was like to stay up till 10 p.m. and with your parents and be like, well, there's no VHS,
No,
so
yeah.
it's like,
yeah, that wasn't around at this point.
and even when they syndicated this and ran it in reruns, and the reruns became must-see TV, right? This legendary 3-season show called Star Trek is only on Tuesday nights at 9 o'clock. If you the re-syndications of it, they did cuts. Like syndication wasn't the same as the original airing. And like, yeah, in this, so there were, I looked it up on Memory Alpha because I'm this kind of a person, but there weren't big cuts in this one for syndication. Okay.
They didn't really miss anything. They missed a lot of those like kind of interstitial scenes and like
sure.
a part where they said like, but they didn't cut anything significant, which is not true for other episodes. Other episodes, the syndication like got way mad at stuff and just like cut things that were shown and were controversial even when they were shown the first time, right?
Yeah. What's funny is you mentioned the cuts, and watching it, even Discovery, you can see a little bit of the dun 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 before the break. Mm-hmm. But like this era of TV is so obvious when it comes to commercial break time.
Yeah, you would be. How would you not know, right?
Yeah, it's pretty funny. If like, imagine my kids now watching this later, being like, "What was that? Like, why did they do that weird scene and fade out thing?" Yeah,
because that's not a thing that's done, right?
No. Mm-mm. Yeah, I gave it a solid 7 because I think that like the part with Spock is good. It may not make a lot of sense, especially because McCoy doesn't lose his bananas and start bashing and it's rocks together. But it does preface Spock's eventual, very soon after this actually, movie stardom and his, in the movies, coming to terms with his emotions, right?
Right. I don't know if this is the first time we see this kind of like emotional nature of Spock.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think that it is. I feel like you get some or I don't know if those are like evil universe Spocks or something earlier in this series. But you definitely get some hints that like, hey, Vulcans aren't always these like cold, logical, moralistic pillars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is way more interesting, I think, to see a character and their foibles than it is for a character to be the one who moralizes to everyone. Right?
Which is why eventually T'Pol gives you tons of insights into the Vulcan mindset, and lots of that stuff backtracks from Vulcans are basically robots. Even androids later, they like create data, and Data's like, I have no emotions. And then by season 2 and 3, they're trying to like give him emotions and break him down.
What does it mean to be a human? And
exactly.
Existential crises, because it's not interesting to have a robot, right?
It's only interesting to have these things if you can then pick apart what it means. Yeah,
you got to be able to tell stories with them, right? Yeah. And there's the story of this is a robot is not interesting.
I mean,
compared with the story of like What does a robot feel? That's interesting.
Remember we were talking about Arium in Discovery and how her
Yeah.
most interesting episode is all of a sudden when you find out that like she's an android or a cyborg because of the death of her husband and
Right.
all these
Character
memories.
development.
You're just like, oh my goodness, that's way more interesting than the weird costume they gave you. You know?
Yes.
Um.
And it is more interesting than when you get to have those discussions, right? And it's part of why when I watched this episode, it was like, it was kind of nice that they didn't have the whole crew there, because you really could get these scenes with just the few characters that were there and have them explore what they wanted to explore, instead of then having to go, okay, we need to get a shot of Geordi here, and then we have to go back and ask Data. Geordi has to ask Data what he thinks so that he gets in, and then O'Brien needs a line, and I'm like, yeah, that kind of more ensemble mentality. And like, look, I love TNG episodes, so I'm making it sound like it's a bad thing here, but the ensemble nature of that changes the way you tell a story, and you don't get to have moments like this, or much rarer those kinds of moments become, right?
Yeah. It definitely feels like these are half-hour things, and then you get to 25 minutes, you're like, how much is left?
Right. And like this one in particular, right? You're like, oh, they stumbled through this portal. All right, McCoy got frostbite. I'm sure he'll recover. Spock and him will go back out. We're all good. That's the whole show. The end, right? And you like look at the running time. You're like, it's been 25 minutes. McCoy is sitting up again. Is this over now? Like,
what's the plan, man?
Gonna rescue Kirk from jail, and that's gonna be the show. We got 40 more minutes here. What are we doing?
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of it definitely reminded me of how far TV's go. So that's my takeaway from this one, for sure.
I wonder, was there any desire on Leonard Nimoy's part to have an episode where he got to have a love interest and Kirk didn't?
Man, he almost did until that Irish woman opened her mouth.
She was game, I'm sure.
She was all over him.
Yeah.
And he was like, no. You got to stop talking.
Also, I feel like there was a part where Kirk, I don't know if it was acting or just he didn't understand the Irish brogue or whatever, and was like, she said a bunch of stuff and he just like looked and smiled and was like, let's go to the next scene. Like, to be fair, I didn't understand what she was saying either.
I didn't understand half of what she said until she was just screaming witch at people.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
I assume that was somewhat intentional.
Oh yeah. I liked how not Earth they made the past. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah. I don't know this island Earth. What is this? Very silly.
Yeah. Pretty silly. Yeah. I think Island Earth is like a sci-fi reference, by the way.
Is it? Okay. I felt like it was a reference to something I should have known, but
I'm pretty sure it's like a film. It's ringing a bell in my head of like MST3K movie that maybe existed.
Okay. That sounds like a thing that could be.
Yeah. Okay. Well, have we picked the next thing we're doing?
I don't think we have. Do we want to pick one live on air?
Yes, we do. Let's do it. Let's work it out live in the air. I'm wondering if we want to do a movie or phaser rankings.
That's tough because both of those, the movie is like, well, I guess, I don't know. I was about to say the movie requires more time, but that might not be true at all.
There's a lot of phasers out there, especially if you go...
A lot of phasers.
Unless we disqualify disruptors and other, if you say just Starfleet phasers.
Jeez. Even if you do that, though, you're going to get so many, just because the prop design has evolved so much.
Oh, yeah.
Gosh. I don't know. Those are both
none
really
of the
great
above.
ideas. I don't know. I mean... Okay. All right. We have to pick a movie, and then we pick between that movie and phasers.
Oh, okay. Kelvin timeline first movie.
So Star Trek. The
Star Trek
reboot.
reboot.
I haven't seen that one in a decent amount of time.
Because it's one of the things we haven't touched, really. Like, we've touched TNG.
We haven't talked about the Kelvin.
We haven't talked about
really.
the Kelvin timeline at all. People are screaming which answer they want while they listen to this live.
I know. I know.
We're going to disappoint half of them.
Yeah, there's no way to win, really.
No, it's
this
fine.
is what happens when you plan live on air.
Yeah.
I would watch the movie. You want to do that?
Yeah. Kelvin timeline Star Trek. That's our next episode for August.
Okay. Hopefully it's available to be streamed.
It is currently on Netflix.
Okay. I mean,
as of July 9th,
as
2021.
Watch it like, oh, this movie is leaving Netflix
Yeah.
August 1st. It's like, oh, damn.
Well, I'll see you later this month. I have a copy I can lend you if needed.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know if I own one.
If you own if you still own a Blu-ray player, I don't.
I have a PS3 somewhere. I could plug that in.
There you go.
All right.
You have a PS4. PS4 reads Blu-rays.
Does it?
It's got to. PS4
I don't
discs
know.
are Blu-rays.
Are they?
PS4 won't read 4K Blu-rays.
Maybe that's what it is.
But it'll read a
whatever,
regular Blu-ray.
I don't know. Anyway.
I didn't know those were different. I was curious when I looked it up. I was like,
so I knew they were different. I just didn't know that it, like, I assumed it was like they kept the name Blu-ray, but it wasn't like really the exact same technology anymore, and you just needed a new thing.
yeah, you need a different. It's still a Blu-ray
laser or something. Right?
But it's a finer. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I think it's a different reading of the disc technology, and I don't think the old ones can move the lasers the right way.
Got it.
Because they're like ultra layered, I assume.
Yeah, that makes some amount of sense.
Because we're still using discs.
It's the only way to own anything.
It's true. Even then, you technically don't, right?
Right. Yeah, that's, man.
Hey.
Well,
we might be getting net neutrality back soon. So.
That sure would be nice.
Sure would.
Well, if you want to tell us about why we made the wrong choice in picking this movie and we should have done the thing about phasers, you can email us at podcast@weweregamers.com and we will happily do the phasers thing the next month.
If you have qualms, first of all, it's important to explore all things, including the Kelvin timeline, and talk about them, because there's interesting things that happen there, and there's complaints to be made as well. Don't worry about it. But if you're gonna tag us and say you should have done phasers, you better send your list of phasers, because otherwise,
yeah, man, there's so much research to do on that one.
I think I already know which one I like, but I have to look.
Okay. Yeah. There's a lot. We're not gonna do the phaser thing now. I gotta stop myself.
I'm looking at them already.
I'm already trying to rank them in my
like
head.
This
no,
one.
We're stopping this. We're stopping this.
Yeah. No, that's a good one.
Close that tab. Close that tab. Close that tab.
Giorgio has one of these? What? Awesome.
Andrew, close that tab. What are you doing?
Oh, man. It's so different in the Kelvin timeline. It fits. All right. Podcast at weweregamers.com.
Yeah, and you can follow this episode and other We Were Gamers episodes on your favorite podcasting app. Hopefully you have enjoyed listening to this and you want to listen to more. We got those broken out on YouTube. You can go find them on a handy playlist on there. If you search for We Were Gamers, all one word, you should find us pretty easily and subscribe. That'd be a big help.
Section 31 phase rifle. That looks cool.
But like, do disruptors count as phasers?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
because otherwise you're just gonna choose the the Klingon hip blaster.
Yeah, I was to say the ones the Klingons and the Romulans have are way cooler than all the Starfleet ones.
No, the Romulan ones suck. Okay, We Were Gamers Part 2.
Yeah.